We begin with the Independent National Electoral Commission's preparation for the conduct of a supplementary poll in Ihiala, local government area of Anambra State, after an earlier declaration of the governorship election as inconclusive. Returning officer of the election, Professor Florence Obi, had announced that the supplementary election will hold on Tuesday in 326 polling units with over 148,000 registered voters. She says the elections could not end on the first ballot because there was no voting in Ihiala, and the votes were substantial enough to tilt the final outcome for any of the top political parties. She justified her actions by citing constitutional provisions and the Electoral Act. Inec has, in line with the extant rules and regulations, announced a slight adjustment to the commencement of the closing time for the supplementary elections. Inec said the polling will now commence at 10 a.m. and end at 4 p.m.
Given the foregoing, it becomes imperative to bring Ihiala local government area at par with the other 20 local government areas in this election before we can make a valid declaration or take any further action based on the extant law. Therefore, I, Professor Florence Banku Obi, in my capacity as returning officer for this election, hereby announce the suspension of the process of collation of results and declaration of a winner until the supplementary election is held in the 326 polling units in Ihiala local government area of the state. I have conferred with the Commission, being the body responsible for fixing the date of the election, and the Commission has decided that the supplementary election will take place on Tuesday, 9th November 2021. Therefore, the collation of results shall resume thereafter.
Meanwhile, candidates of the People's Democratic Party in Anambra State governorship election, Valentine Ozigbo, says he can still emerge as the winner as there are over 240,000 votes at stake. Addressing a press conference in Awka, the state capital, Ozigbo said the PDP can close the gap if electoral officials and materials are effectively deployed on time for the Ihiala supplementary election and voting in some polling units. He currently has 51,322 votes and is trailing Chukwuma Soludo, candidate of the All Progressive Grand Alliance, APGA, who has scored 103,946 votes.
Yes, the voter turnout hasn't been impressive, and so one would argue how many out of this 148,000 will show up. But I can tell you that with the amount of effort being put in by the different stakeholders, different parties, we're likely to have more people show up in Ihiala than anywhere else. And our wish and our hope and our desire is to obtain the advantage that the other party may have at this point in time. What that means is we're going to be urging all our friends, supporters in Ihiala to come out en masse and do the needful. And with that, I can tell you that the chances are still great for PDP to take over this election. And so, I want to put it on record that indeed the race is still on. And we need to, and we're doing all we need to do to build sufficient momentum to win Ihiala handsomely. And by extension, the rest of the other local governments where elections have not taken place in all the polling units. Quite a number of them, including Idemili North, Idemili South, Awka North, and many more. Altogether, about 12 more local governments will witness additional elections taking place. And apart from Ihiala, the rest have up to 100,000 votes plus, meaning that if we should harness well and correct some of the things that we found wrong, and I'll come to it, we actually do stand a great chance.
All right, Tundu, A breakdown on this.
Well, I think Valentine Ozigbo is making the right noises. He's saying exactly what he should say, because really politics just boils down to who people relate to, who they believe in, and who can mobilize them. So he has to do his best. You know, it's not over till the fat lady sings, or so the idiom goes. However, your former colleague has taken a completely different, approach to this. Mwapo.
Akachukwu Sullivan Nwankwo, candidate of the African Democratic Congress.
Thank you for that. You know him very well. So he has conceded to Charles Soludo. He's thrown in the towel. But I guess Valentine Ozigbo of PDP wants to go to the bitter end. But is what he's saying likely or even possible? That remains to be seen. There's quite a wide margin as far as these elections go. Over 52,000 is the margin over which APCA is leading PDP. I'm not sure if you can close that. You have 148,000 approximately voters in Ihiala local government. Will they all come out to vote? Will they all come out and vote PDP? That's quite a huge stretch to try and imagine that. Those votes are going to be split across the parties. So I'm not sure if it's entirely possible. The board, of course, is going to fight to the end and not throw in the towel.
Dr. Bati?
Well, politicians are optimists. So you don't expect a Valentine Ozigbo, who is in the second position in the results released so far, to lose hope. It's not over for politicians until it is over. And, I agree with you absolutely, Tuno, that he has said what he's supposed to say. But with the Ihiala election today, will it be a game changer? Will the Ihiala factor change anything? I think we should look at a number of variables. One, the three leading candidates, none of them is from Ihiala. They are all three, APGA, PDP, APC, they are all from one local government, Aguata local government. So you are not likely to have any serious emotional attachment to the three leading candidates in Ihiala. Second, there are 18 candidates minus one now contesting for those votes, over 148,000 votes. So the votes will naturally be split. Third, in terms of voter turnout, what we've seen in on Saturday, November 6th, was a turnout of about 10 to 15% in most of the polling units. So would the people of Ihiala, find a compelling reason to turn out maybe even up to 50%? That remains to be seen. It will depend on, the kind of security situation and the kind of expectations that the people themselves have. Now, another issue is that if you look at the history of polling in Ihiala local government, 2010, 2013, and I think 2017, the people of Ihiala have always voted for APGA, not for PDP, not for APC. So this time around, would the people of Ihiala again follow the historical pattern and vote for APGA? And again, what other factors are here? From what I see, I do not think that anything earth-shaking would happen. I suspect that the people may vote along historical lines and still, vote massively for Charles Soludo. More so, as the only candidate from Ihiala, the man you mentioned, Akachukwu Sullivan Nwankwo, candidate of the African Democratic Congress, is from Ihiala. That's his constituency. Perhaps if there had been a vote there on Saturday, maybe he would have, been the winner in that local government. YPP having taken one local government, the PDP having taken one local government. But will he have taken it? But we have him, who is from that local government, coming forward to say his people should vote for APGA, and that he himself will vote for APGA, and that he has already on his own endorsed Charles Soludo as a leading contender in this matter. Now, that may also work heavily in the favor of, Charles Soludo. So, but we'll see what happens at the end of the day, because in politics, as they say, anything can happen. Will there be 2-3 political parties coming together to say, we endorse this person or endorse that person? What difference will it make? Many of these political parties were scoring 4 votes, 5 votes, so the race, I think, is still likely at the end of the day to favor the APGA, which seems to be the party of choice. And don't forget that Soludo was even able to beat the other candidates in their strongholds.
Yeah.
Persons like Dr. Maduka, Mr. Peter Obi, and some of those people in Anaucha, in Idemili, even in Aguata, where three of the major candidates contested. So what the message that is being sent across perhaps is that APGA, is a preferred party in Anambra State. But maybe we should not say that. We should just wait for the people of Ihiala to take a decision. But from the facts available to us, both historical and contemporary, I see that at the end of the day, not much is likely to change. And we can begin to look forward to what the eventual winner, when he's announced by Inec, will deliver for the people of Anambra. The people have staked a lot. There's a lot at stake in this regard. They've made the necessary sacrifice. But what is important is how Anambra moves forward after today.
Right. Thank you guys so much, Dr. Mati and Tundu. As people return to the polls for supplementary election in Ihiala, local government area in Anambra, we are now joined live from the Inec Coalition Center in Awka by our Rise correspondent, Abel Ejikeme. Abel, great to have you. How are you? How is everything going this morning? What's the mood like? Sounds sort of like a cliche question, but the truth is, we'd like to gauge what is happening in the state.
Yeah, very good morning to you out there, Rufai and Dr. Abati, as well as Tundu. Good to see you guys again. Anambra is very cool and calm this morning. I'm at the Inec Coalition Center here in Awka, the Anambra State capital, where the election, once it's done in Ihiala local government area, will be brought here for the final announcement. Just a few minutes ago, I saw officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission mobilizing their staff and personnel to move towards Ihiala local government area. So all eyes are currently fixed on Ihiala and what the people in that local government area will deliver. Just a quick one, let's tell you that you already know this, of course. Soludo is in the clear lead. That's the candidate of the All Progressives Grand Alliance. He is trailed by the PDP candidate, Valentine Ozibo, as well as Andy Uba of the APC. So all eyes are looking at the 148,000 registered voters in Ihiala. But will there be any surprise? That remains to be seen. Just a quick historical fact. In 2010 Anambra State governorship election, Ihiala had a total number of 83,348 registered voters. But of that number, just 16,029 people came out to register their votes. It will be of note that APGA actually won that election in that local government in 2010. In 2013, Ihiala had 111,531 registered voters in that particular election, but APGA still won that same election with, they recorded over 10,000 votes. In 2017, the same thing happened. Ihiala had a total of 124,588 registered voters, and in that same year, APGA also pulled through. So not much is actually expected to happen. So people actually believe residents of Ihiala local government will still toe this line in voting the candidates of the All Progressives Grand Alliance. So would there be any major swing? The clear answer will be no. But if this results from past elections is anything to go by, your guess is as good as mine. And there are over 148,000 people who will come out to vote. If you check historically as well, you'll see a very low voter turnout in previous elections. Will anything change today? Your guess is also as good as mine. And even if the 148,000 people come out to cast their ballots, definitely there will be a spread across party lines for the various candidates. So it's expected that the All Progressives Grand Alliance, following historical things we've just reeled out, will take up the day in Ihiala. Over to you.
Well, quickly, what is your assessment of the preparation, the arrangements by the security agencies? Because you know that on Saturday, the major concern was security. And this is a border community between Anambra and Imo State. Are there any anxieties, any fears about, the security situation again going south? And are the INEC officials already on the ground, if you are in Ihiala?
I'm currently in Oka, actually,
Okay.
and I spoke with a very, very senior official of the Independent National Electoral Commission last night, and he assured me that they've gotten assurances from the heads of the several security agencies here in Oka that their assets and men are on ground to ensure that peace and tranquility reign in Ihiala local government, that people shouldn't be scared of coming out to exercise their enfranchisement, but they should come out en masse to cast their ballot. The police commissioner also said yesterday that they will make sure that their men are on ground in Ihiala local government to ensure that there is peace in that local government and people will feel safe when coming out to cast their ballot. So from all indications, INEC is saying they are ready. Their men will be deployed there or are already on their way to Ihiala local government. The materials for the election are already at the local government area, ready for the commencement of election by 10 a.m. up to 4 p.m.
Do we know, Abel, why INEC decided to start voting at 10 a.m.? I imagine that anything INEC is doing now is for the convenience of the voters, but do we have any information on that? And also, has there been enough time between Saturday and today to address the concerns that were raised about the BVAS?
Absolutely, absolutely. I spoke with a very senior official last night, and he assured me that those issues, those glitches experienced with the BVAS device, that the technicians were on hand to ensure that those experiences that were seen on Saturday don't repeat itself again today. So I want to believe it's been taken care of, and that's why they extended the time from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. so that those who may experience this kind of glitches in today's supplementary election will have enough time to get that device fixed and actually cast their ballot. So they are on ground to ensure that today's supplementary election in Ihiala local government is hitch-free.
Let me walk you back a little bit, Abel. How many people have even picked up their PVCs in Ihiala as we speak? What's the pickup rate of permanent voters card?
Absolutely, it's a very low one. As at Friday afternoon, last week Friday afternoon, we were told by INEC officials that residents of that same local government, and indeed Anambra State, we are still moving about picking up their PVC. So it's been very low, very, very low. If we have 148,000 registered voters there, you can imagine how many of them would have their PVCs to cast their ballot. That remains to be seen. That actually remains to be seen. But officially, I don't have those figures as to the number of those who have picked up their PVCs. But we just hope and wait and see how many of them will really turn out to cast their ballots later today.
All right, thank you so much, Abel. Really appreciate you. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotu Sodiri, Michael Wilson, Adesuwa Moroa, and Aaron Akirejola to give us updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rota.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, so it's all energy, climate change, fossil fuels, activists, and so on. Obama yesterday at COP26, we carried his speech live. He fired up the youth, saying that they should have a right to be angry about his generation not doing all they can on climate change and energy promises and so on and so forth as far as the transition is concerned. And he said they should protest. He said they should do social media activism and so on and so forth. Now, that was yesterday. Today in Cape Town is Africa Energy Week, and there's going to be a number of bigwigs that will be attending this very large forum. Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Timi Presilva, is going to be there. The Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Mele Kiari, is going to be there as well. Wale Tinubu, CEO of Owando, he's going to be there. Mohamed Barkindo, OPEC Secretary General, he's going to be there as well. A lot of these dignitaries, plus others from different other countries, are going to be talking about, in the midst of what's going on with this whole climate change discussion, they will be talking about the energy transition and how fossil fuel dependent African nations like South Africa, like Nigeria, like Gabon, Republic of Congo, all these other countries, how that transition can be made effectively without losing jobs and without adversely affecting these nations. I remember President Buhari, when he was making his international trips like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he said that this climate change matter should not turn into an energy crisis for fossil fuel dependent nations. Remember, Africa does not emit as much emissions compared to the United States and China and other countries, but is disproportionately affected, right? So it's how to manage that, and that's how, Timi Silva, Wale Tinubu, Mele Kyari, Mr. Barkindo, all of them plus others are going to be. Our very own Bosun Omofaya, he's also going to be there as well, and going to be, taking notes of proceedings. So it's a big, big week there. I want to take you to something that happened about a couple weeks ago. Not sure if you saw this. Again, this is still within energy. A climate activist actually confronting Mr. Van Beurden, who is the CEO of Shell. Take a listen to this.
Lauren, your question to Ben.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to give a little bit of context. So Shell and Siccar Point Energy are trying to push a new oil field through the UK Parliament, the Campbell oil field, which is going to be off the coast of Scotland, which obviously is my home. So, Mr. Van Beurden, I just want to start by saying that you should be absolutely ashamed of yourself for the devastation that you have caused to communities all over the world. Already, you are responsible for so much death and suffering. I'm not even going to appeal to you to change, because I know that that would be a wasted opportunity. What I do want to say is that every single day that you fail to stop making evil decisions is a day that the death toll of the climate crisis rises. You are one of the most responsible people for this crisis in the world, and in my view, that makes you one of the most evil people in the world. No matter what he says today, remember, Shell has spent millions covering up the warnings from climate scientists, bribing politicians and even paying soldiers to kill Nigerian activists fighting against them, all whilst rebranding to make it look as though they care and that they have the intention of changing.
The incredible thing about that is this isn't a situation where the activists stormed the stage while they were talking and then security carted them off. She was given a seat at the table, like she was part of the TED Talk. And Van Beurden knew this in advance, that a climate activist was going to be on stage at this talk. So again, within the context of Africa Energy Week, within the context of COP26, within the context of the entire discussion around climate change, that organizations are giving activists a platform. A former US president is telling the youth, go and protest. It's huge. So it really calls to the forefront for African nations that are going to be attending Africa Energy Week this week to really ramp up how fast they make this transition, because, we're seeing oil companies react. Look at Total Energies, for example. They've made an announcement that they will be planting about 40 million trees in the Republic of Congo over the next 10 years. Again, don't forget, Total changed their name to Total Energies to move away from the fact that they don't want to be associated with fossil fuels. You can call it a PR campaign if you want. But what they're doing with this planting of trees is to create what they call carbon sinks. And these carbon sinks are supposed to be ecosystems that neutralize the effect of methane emissions and other emissions from companies like this across the world. So lots to talk about in energy. Finally, movies. It's interesting. Ebony Life, Mo Abudu's company, has some kind of partnership with Netflix, where certain movies are being released in limited capacity. So, for example, The Harder They Fall and Red Notice with The Rock and this Ryan Reynolds came out this weekend in limited release, but they're also being simultaneously released on streaming. So it's more competition for the cinemas, who, of course, whose revenues have been hit by COVID-19. They're also having to deal with not just Netflix. I mean, Arise, Play, and other streaming platforms that are now partnering with cinemas here in Nigeria to put their material out there. So another interesting development there.
You're reminding me vaguely of the Black Widow lawsuit with Scarlett Johansson and Disney. But to come to this climate activist young lady who was very upset, I thought that Shell, yes, in spite of everything else, they have been accused recently, even Total, all of the oil majors, of greenwashing. But is it greenwashing? Because we are all facing an existential crisis. So I don't want to be too cynical about any action that any company is taking to pivot away from that road to certain destruction. If they are concentrating on restoring ecosystems, shouldn't they be encouraged, commended, like what Total is doing in Congo? Shell also has one $300 million project for reforestation across the world, not just in Africa. Shouldn't they be commended? And I thought Shell was one of the first oil companies to acknowledge the effects that their industry is having on climate change. Don't they get a little pat on the back for that?
Right. There's definitely an argument to be made for that, yes. But I think what the activists are saying is that, well, as you said, it's greenwashing. You're not doing enough, is their point. But again,
okay. Go ahead.
Dr. Bati, you go. Go ahead.
Dr.
No,
Bati,
you go ahead.
You go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Lovely, I love it.
I think the point you made is really the big challenge in terms of how, companies, either in the financial sector or the multinationals, are reacting to this commitment about, addressing the challenge of climate change. You recall that the United Nations had to sound an alarm that although the experts have said under the Paris Climate Accord and the follow-ups that, look, what is best for the world will be 1.5 degrees Celsius. But that with the way we're going, with the gap between promises and action, we could find ourselves in a situation where we'll be looking at 2.9 degrees Celsius, which will be a problem for the rest of the world, which is why it's instructive that the recent G20 meeting and at the recent COP26 United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow, Scotland, there was this commitment to climate change. Now, you've mentioned two companies this morning, Shell. As for Shell, Tunde has already put in a word. But Total Energies, you mentioned, what they're doing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Yesterday was National Tree Planting Day in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what, Shell and Total Energies announced is what they call this carbon sink project, initiative they call it, in the Bateke Plateau. And in that Bateke Plateau, they have about 40,000 hectares of land to plant 40 million trees within the next, 35 years. And the whole idea, is consistent with this commitment by companies to try to get into this climate change, both the politics of it and the actuality of it, and to make a demonstration. Now, what I would like to say is that with regard to Total, other companies should also follow suit. And you'll recall that in that regard, at the COP26, when they had this Africa Earth Summit, Jeff Bezos had promised to contribute almost about $1 billion to the climate change initiative. And his plan also is that, look, other people will follow suit. But the big problem is this gap between promise and action. And I think Total Energies is providing leadership in this particular regard. As for Netflix had shown interest in Africa for quite a while now, not just Nigeria, but also in Kenya and also in other parts of the continent. One, I think because Africa is a big market, isn't it? We have quite a huge population. Africa, as they say, is the last frontier. And the advantage for us in Africa is that it gives us the opportunity to tell our stories to the world. It helps the creative industry in Africa. And I think that the partnerships that Netflix has been able to strike, either in Kenya or Nigeria, with Mo Abudu, of Ebony Life, providing the lead, the only company, the first person with which Netflix will sign a multi-series deal with, and we've been seeing products of Ebony Life, on Netflix, Cashew and Cashew, Big Daddy, and all of those products. The other person that Netflix is also partnering with is John Boyega, the actor. So it's a good development for the cultural space in Africa, and we hope that the persons who are partnering with Netflix will make the best of it in helping to tell the African story and to address the imbalance in the world information order, either in the media or in the movie world.
So, Rotus, my point is this. I think we should be very realistic with ourselves when we talk about climate change and energy and all of that. Yes, I'm not saying the oil majors didn't have their own blame. but they're trying to make atonement. But the question is, we needed that energy as at that point in our economies to grow. Prior to the 1700s or the 1960s, when this zeitgeist about climate change started as a result of the oil spill in the Gulf, we have always had a need for energy. And you can't take that away. And transiting to fossil fuel is really expensive. In Britain, for instance, they have to tax citizens for the transition. They've set a target for 2050. Other developing countries are begging for money to be given to them to be able to make that transition.
$100 billion.
Is this feasible, Rotus?
Right.
It is not. I'll give you another clear instance. Cote d'Ivoire just discovered oil.
Should we say they shouldn't explore it?
So should we say Cote d'Ivoire shouldn't explore its oil because of this argument?
Right.
So when we make this argument, when we can, when people play shell all they want, and I'm not saying, completely exonerate them, but the truth is, what could they have done?
Right.
When John Brown, the CEO of BP in the early 2000s, started this project Beyond Petroleum, and I think it was BP that was the first oil company to really go that green route, we started thinking beyond petroleum. The question is, how feasible is it? You still need that energy mix. I know there's the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. There are many other oil spills. Climate change is really hitting down on all of us. But when you look at it, it's also the price we pay for industrialization. And we should all come to the table to get a proper energy mix. That is what nobody has been able to say to me on the table. We are saying, okay, we are decarbonizing by 2060, 2070. That's the threshold time. What is the energy mix leading up to that time? Are you going to say Cote d'Ivoire don't mine your oil? Are you going to say Angola don't mine your oil? Nigeria kick your oil apart? You forget that once we decarbonize, once we pull out hydrocarbon, where does Nigeria get revenue from?
Well,
So those are the conversations we need to have with ourselves.
I think the only consolation for you, I get your point about the energy mix, is that this energy transition is likely to take up to about 50 years. It's not as if it's something that is going to happen overnight. And to that extent, I will consider the conversation useful in terms of protecting the future of our planet.
Well said.
Well, thank you, Rotus.
Thank you so much.
Moving on to more business update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Asia markets, nothing really to focus on today in terms of data and so on. So fairly mixed, quite honestly. Nikkei just about 0.1%. China more or less unchanged, quite honestly. Not a great deal. I know this is what a news editor would always shout at you for saying, but there's not a great deal going on as far as the Asia markets are concerned. However, China property could see further pain. Evergrande crisis appears to be abating. It's saying that it's completed about 58,000 project deliveries from July to October. But there are still worries about this. It appears as though it's kind of resolving its debt problems. It's just raised about $145 million just before a deadline for fresh debt interest payment comes into force. It's sold a 5.7% in one of its media firms, and it needs to make overdue interest payments. I'd stress the overdue of $148 million this week. So far, it's defaulted on its debts until the end of the grace periods arrive. And so basically, it's not really doing a great deal for investors. I'll come on to the Fed in just a second with their warning about that. But staying in China, this is a good one, actually. Chinese auto giant Geely is launching an electronic truck. It's rivaling Tesla's Semi. When you see pictures of it, it's built by Farizon Auto. There it is. It's incredibly luxurious inside. It's got what has it got inside? It's got a shower. It's got a lavatory, a single bed, refrigerator, and it will be either powered with methanol hybrid or indeed a hybrid between that and electricity and so on. And it also will somehow overcome this problem that you always have with electric vehicles, is the batteries are so expensive to replace. It's apparently using some kind of swapping system. Geely is aiming for autonomous driving, as they call it, by 2030. So let's turn our attention to the United States and Wall Street. Well, it got to another record close overnight. We're seeing Alphabet getting to a $2 trillion market capital level, joining Apple and Microsoft in that. Once again, momentum slightly waned in Asia as a result of the US stock futures, which is showing a bit of a decline, quite honestly. But no surprise that most people were buying into infrastructure stocks yesterday on Wall Street, given Biden's plan just was awaiting his signature yesterday. And materials was the top performing S&P group as well. And S&P, it's worth noting this, up 25% on the year. And overall, the US markets, it's due for a fall, it's got to be. Longest run of closing highs since 1997. So the Fed has a sort of biennial, twice a year look at what's going on. I know we appear to be hearing a lot about it, but the Fed says that the real estate troubles in China could spill over into the United States. It's not so much it's about real estate, it's the way in which a company like Evergrande has also got lots of other companies involved, diversified into other areas of the economy. If that were to fold in upon itself, then there would be trouble, says the Fed. Analysts looked at this and thought, you know what, yeah, we get that. It's not had an enormous effect on the market, but it is a warning. Bitcoin and other and Ether have hit all-time highs. I've seen some frightening estimates of where Bitcoin might be going. Then it might not. Who knows? That's the problem with it. It rose above $67,000, and that remember that ETF we were talking about a couple of weeks ago that launched up more than 8% yesterday. Let's turn our attention to the UK, and this is Rolls-Royce Engineering, not the Rolls-Royce cars, but Rolls-Royce Engineering gets mini nuclear plant design as a sort of state backing. It's an industry consortium, half industry, half private, half the taxpayer. Business Secretary says will say today when he launches it, it'll be a once in a lifetime opportunity to deploy more low carbon energy. It's got, I say, this mix of private firm and also the taxpayer should create, it says, 40,000 jobs by 2050. Amazing how you can look at these dates in the future, isn't it, and make predictions about them. As far as the UK is concerned, the Northern Ireland, the EU, there he is. This is kind of Simon Coveney, senior Irish minister, saying that the UK-EU trade deal could collapse over the row about Northern Ireland. It gets more and more complicated. You'll know that it keeps the protocol keeps Northern Ireland in the EU single market for goods, which prevents a hard border with Ireland and allows free-flowing trade with the EU. It's intensely complicated, and that will continue. Oil's recovery is continuing. Held on to gains, which it made. I told you about Saudi Aramco yesterday, saying it was going to basically charge more for its oil. Very little that President Biden in the White House can do to keep prices down is the bottom line about this. Brent crude 1.6% higher at $83 a barrel, and we'll see how that moves throughout the day. And gold is hanging on to its Friday gains. It's technically speaking, if you look at where it is right now, there's a feeling that if it gets to above 1800, then it will probably stay there. It's at 1822. It may well get to $2,000 a dollar. If it gets to that, then I feel the only way for it is upwards. And today, just a quick note, basically, we're going to hear from a lot of central bankers today. We're going to hear from Jay Powell. We're going to hear from the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey. And we're also going to hear from EC President Christine Lagarde, all of whom will probably say, don't worry, folks, this inflationary stuff is just transitory. I'd be careful about that, quite honestly, but I know we have our doubts on this program about those kind of prognostications. That's the global view.
All right, Michael, let's go straight to it. Inflation is like the spirit of the moment, sort of like a spiritus mundi now in the world. Some people in Bank of England are saying we wouldn't, increase those numbers, those interest rate numbers, not anytime soon. The European Central Bank is saying something entirely different. The Fed is saying, yeah, inflation will be transitory. At some point, it will go by itself, so there's no reason to increase interest rate now. And at the same time, the market is betting so strong on this. So what is really happening? Because there's sort of like a limbo in the markets in the world now. We don't know where we're going. We just keep hearing all sorts. Andrew Bailey says something today. Somebody else says something tomorrow. Nobody gets it. And this uncertainty, this sort of like Heisenberg uncertainty happening in the world now It's scary for investors. And secondly, when will China come clean on Evergrande? When will they come clean? Nobody's telling us anything. They're not paying back their bonds, interest, and the likes.
Okay, ring up China today when you finish work and ask to speak to their chief information officer and say, when are you going to come clean about Evergrande? And what will the response be? What do you actually think it's going to be? So we just don't know, do we? What we see is, all we can do is we can look at whether they're repaying their debt or not. We can look at how Evergrande is actually divesting itself to make sure it gets some money, as I've just told you it has. But we have these continuing warnings. If it were to spill over, not just into the general economy in China, but also into the other companies in which these real estate companies have actually got stakes, then I think we're in trouble. Again, as I always say about this, I can't see the Chinese government wanting to lose face about this. As far as central banks is concerned, all of them at the moment are feeling their way forward with a white stick. All we've heard really, we've heard Andrew Bailey from the Bank of England a couple of weeks ago saying we will raise interest rates if necessary. We heard from the Fed last week saying that it was going to increase its tapering program fairly soon. As far as the EU's concerned, and Christine Lagarde, she's not saying, the ECB president, rather, Christine Lagarde, is saying nothing. At the last meeting, they didn't move at all. We waiting to see what may happen in the December meeting. All these central banks are not willing to actually be the first to move, and they daren't do that because they know that if they do, they will probably move too quickly, because once one moves in a big way with interest rates, then the others will probably follow. And again, nobody knows. Let me stress this. I don't know, you may know more than I do. I do not know, and I don't think the experts know, and I'm no expert, I'm just an observer, whether this inflation is transitory or fundamental. It's simply do not know. We've been so far down a bad track over the past couple of years. It's difficult to see where we are coming out of it and what kind of shape the world is going to be when we do eventually come out of it. And we are not coming out of it anytime soon. So therefore, I can't see central banks moving in a significant way yet. They may well do next month, but next month is next month. And next month is a long, long way away from where we are right now.
Well, Michael, I mean, this divergence in terms of reaction to inflation and whether interest rates should be increased or not, front page story, Financial Times today. But, you know, I thought you were going to explain what is responsible for this divergence between the European Union, Philip Lane, the European Central Bank chief economist, was the one saying, well, we'll still watch it because we think this is transitory. But in the UK and also the United States, there is a firm, commitment, even if they've not taken action yet, that something is likely to happen very soon. What accounts for this radical difference? Is it differences in the recovery, in the rebound, or are there other considerations? And Elon Musk, that stunt he pulled on Twitter with regard to unrealized gains and billionaire tax, that has resulted in a fall in the shares, of his company. Are there lessons for him to learn from those Twitter stunts that he seems to find so attractive?
Well, Elon Musk, first of all, again, if you want to run your company on Twitter, completely up to you. What he's doing is he's virtue signaling the fact that, yes, he's going to sell a particular, 10% stake in his company, and he knows he's going to face a big tax bill, and he's going to take it on the chin. Well, good for him. That's all I can say. It's not how I would run a company. I'd not be going to Twitter every 10 minutes to say what I'm thinking. I would go through the normal kind of thing, and I would consult my shareholders, because that's the way forward, and that's what's been done traditionally. You want to move on to the Twitter space, that's absolutely fine, but don't expect people, more traditional people like me, to approve of it, and certainly the market regulators don't either. I'm surprised, I keep saying this to you, I'm really surprised he's allowed to get away with this. I'm surprised the SEC allows him to get away with this in the United States, because the SEC is not backward in coming forward about not only placing its own jurisdiction over US companies, but also placing its tentacles all the way around the world to try to govern what the global corporate situation actually is. I'm really surprised at that. Cannot understand why they haven't acted. As far as differing in opinion is concerned, I'm not sure I agree with you. I feel as though there's still the big unanswered question that all these central bankers are after right now. And remember, they are politicians as well. But remember also, even Andrew Bailey is as well. He doesn't think he is, but he is, because that's the kind of position he's in. They've all said, if necessary, we will X, Y, and Z, but we don't know whether it's necessary or not. Nobody knows, or nobody's actually saying outright, hang on a second, inflation's here to stay. The markets think it does, but the actual central bankers don't. I don't think there's a division of opinion about them. I just think nobody wants to make the first move.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now for an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Amorwa joins us now. Morning, Adeswa.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Dr. Abati, and good morning, Rufai. Very quickly into it, the global COVID-19 cases have now surpassed 250 million infections as more normal trade and tourism resume, although some countries in Eastern Europe are experiencing record outbreaks, and the region has once again emerged as the epicenter of the COVID-19 pandemic. A look at the tally from the Johns Hopkins University also shows that globally over 5 million people have died from the virus since 2019, and of course at least 7.2 billion doses of vaccines have been administered. This is as Costa Rica yesterday became the first country in the world to make COVID-19 vaccinations mandatory for children. Here in Nigeria, 52 new cases were officially reported in 9 states. The NCDC is reporting 0 COVID-19 related deaths in the last 24 hours in the country. It is not clear why vaccination data remains 48 hours late in Nigeria, but here's what we know so far. 5.77 million eligible persons targeted for the COVID-19 vaccinations, or 5.2%, have received a first dose of vaccine, while 3.14 million others have been fully vaccinated, meaning that they have received recommended 2 doses of their jabs. We hope to get more insights on the vaccination exercise across the country later today when the agency in charge briefs the press. I'll bring you details as they emerge tomorrow. Now, the U.S. has reopened its land and air borders to all vaccinated travelers for the first time in 20 months. This easing of restrictions covers the UK, Brazil, China, South Africa, India, and the 26 EU member countries. There are still some rules in place, though, to be eligible to travel. Travelers have to show proof of full vaccination by any of the 8 WHO-authorized vaccines. They also have to provide a negative COVID-19 test result or proof that they have recently recovered from the virus. Now, children don't need to be vaccinated, but any age between 2 and 17 years old will have to take a COVID test between 3 and 5 days after arriving in the U.S. And this means that millions of people around the world who were vaccinated with Russia's Sputnik V or China's Casino vaccines or any other shot not recognized by the US or WHO cannot at the moment go to the US. Away from the US, after enjoying extremely high levels of public support for its COVID-19 pandemic response, the government in New Zealand in the early hours of today faced its largest protest in decades as anti-vaccine mandate protesters marched the streets of Wellington, forcing the parliament to be placed on high alert. They were led by protesters riding motorcycles. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has responded. She says the protesters were not representative of New Zealanders whom most of them, she says, have already gotten vaccinated. Now, due to increasing threats from anti-vaxxers, this is something we're beginning to see, increased threats from anti-vaxxers in some parts of the world. In Israel particularly, health authorities say they will now take a key decision on vaccinating children against COVID-19 out of the public domain because of these threats. Instead, the conclusion on the debate on approving the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine for children ages 5 to 11 years old, as we saw in the US last week, will be published. The discussion is slated for Wednesday, which is tomorrow. And finally, more vaccine news. The UK will now accept All recognized WHO-approved vaccines for travelers to the country starting 22nd of this month. It will be adding the likes of China's Sinovac, Sinopharm, India's Covaxin to the list of countries approved vaccine for travelers. In a travel update on Twitter, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps also said that those under 18s who are fully vaccinated arriving from non-red list countries will be allowed to take the lateral flow test on arrival from that same day they arrive. And this means, guys, that those in that age category under 18 from countries such as Nigeria will not benefit from that adjusted restrictions or rules. They will still have to quarantine when they get to the UK because, as you know, vaccination against COVID-19 at the moment in Nigeria is for those aged 18 and above.
Start with New Zealand. I think it's unfortunate what is happening in New Zealand, considering the fact that Jacinta Ardern, the leader of New Zealand, has been one of those persons we have had cause to commend in terms of the leadership she provided, the structures she put in place with regard to the COVID-19 situation in New Zealand. However, when, about 2,000 New Zealanders trooped out early this morning, blocking traffic and protesting and carrying placards. The immediate, observation is that, yes, these are anti-vaxxers, people who are against, the mandate, the COVID-19 mandate that was rolled out last month by the government of Jacinta Ardern, which will affect about 40% of the workforce, simply, about people just following the rules. But one of the problems they have in New Zealand has to do with vaccine resistance, vaccine hesitancy. But the big question is that, is this really about the vaccine mandate following the, the indication that the Delta variant was, abroad in New Zealand in August? Or is this something else? Because if you look at the banners carried and the flags carried by most of the protesters, they seem to be using the protest early today as some kind of Trojan horse for ideological protests. The Maori sovereignty movement and other people, attacking the government of the day and hiding under the cover of protests against anti-vaccine mandate to pass across other messages. Now, as for the UK, well, the UK also makes it clear, even while opening up to fully vaccinated persons to come. The same thing also in the United States. There's this attempt also to open up. But the caveat is put there, as we have seen elsewhere, that if there is any sudden upsurge, then of course the authorities will not hesitate to restrict access again. Before this latest move, the UK had also reviewed its traffic light system, which was something that was also copied in New Zealand, leading to that protest. As for Israel, meeting the health ministry meeting behind closed doors, when that ministry met last week to see if they could follow the example of the United States that had approved the Pfizer-BioNTech for young people between the ages of 5 and 11, there were protests. Even some of the members of that health ministry were targeted. So I think this is a question of just being careful, and the plan is that the meeting this week will be held behind closed doors. However, Israel has done very well in terms of vaccination, one of the most innovative countries, in that regard. It was Israel that first started overnight vaccination, as you will recall. But let's see what happens. What we have seen, of course, is that even in Israel, many people have taken the third shot, and now they're talking about following in the footsteps of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Right. The third shot is interesting to me. Obviously, it was in the news because Boris Johnson, found the perfect time to use that as an excuse to avoid certain political challenges he was having. But it just called to mind the fact that those of us who have done what we think is right and have been double, vaxxed, our protection is waning, isn't it? So when are we going to have that conversation here? I realize that there hasn't been enough to go around, which Tedros Ghebreyesus has said till he's blue in the face. But nobody is really listening. The developing world is going ahead full steam. But we are sitting here with our 2 jabs that we took, ages ago? And really, what exactly is the efficacy? That conversation does need to be had here. Unfortunately, it just has to be had. What is the point of the effort that we made if we're no longer fully protected? If we can see the sort of mobilization that's been attempted across the world, and that mobilization has had limited success. It seems as if people just have COVID fatigue and vaccine fatigue, which we're seeing in New Zealand, how well-behaved they were during the lockdown, how obedient to the science and to their government that they were. Now we have this rebellion. I think people have just had it. Even generally, the uptake of the booster jabs is low, and it doesn't make a lot of sense logically, I suppose. If you submit yourself to be vaccinated and then you start to doubt the science when it comes time to having children vaccinated, people just are getting tired of this vaccine issue. What is the way out of this, Adeswa? Do you know? Because I really don't.
I wish I knew, Tundun, but it will have to do with a lot of persuasion and sometimes, using the stick as well, which we're seeing in many countries, including Nigeria, where civil servants have been mandated to get vaccinated or stay away from their offices, which means no pay, really. So at some point, we'll have to strike a balance at what exactly we want as people of the world. Do we live with this virus? How do we live with this virus? When do we call it quit? And what are we doing generally?
So I think the problem with a lot of people is the uncertainty in the world this virus brings. I mean, we don't know when it's going to end. It doesn't have a start and finish date. I mean, even if somebody is sick in the hospital and you're taking a course of chemotherapy, you know when it's going to end. You know how many sessions you're going to take. But this just goes on and on and on and on. And that's why cool heads must prevail now. I know a lot of people are losing it, but please, we can't afford to jeopardize all the successes and all the wins we've made because we're angry at this point in time. And anti-vaxxers can afford to go out there because of their own personal convictions and nullify the empirical convictions and proof of science. It is empirical. You can see it, you can touch it, there's a science behind it. You can see it works. Hospital numbers are cut. Death rates reduced. It's been able to stem the tide of this virus. That is empirical.
Indeed.
Yeah, you have a point of view, but there's an empirical point of view. Let us follow that. Let us stay the course. Let us fight the fight together. I mean, in 2019, nobody talked about COVID. We had our lives. But this has happened, and the world must fight it together. And we can all do it, just like we fought Ebola, just like we fought other viruses and things like this. And I think it is time for global solidarity, which I'm not seeing a lot of at this point in time.
Anyway, thank you very much, Adeswa. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.